Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Quartet Lesson 1 Part 2 live stream. In the last Part 1 live stream, we covered noun plus toyeba, nara, tori, and dashi. If you're looking for that video, there will be a link up in the corner of this video, I believe the right corner, when I put out the stream cut. Tonight we're covering Part 2 of the lesson, which will be tame ni and tame no, ga kikkake de, you ni naru, you ni suru, and noun ni yoru to. These are the colors that we're using in the new intermediate lessons. In case it's your first time here, we're doing grammar section points with blue, light blue. New words that aren't necessarily in the book yet or weren't in Genki yet are going to be colored by JLPT level. So N4 will be dark blue, N3 will be light green, etc. Any words that are going to show up in later quartet lessons will have this weird little gray color. So that's what you have to look forward to with the coloring in these lessons. Now, before we get started, you know I've always got to do this. Sorry about that. 日本語を喋れるようになりたいのか? Hold up. We already did this. We already talked about how you can use our Genki 1 and 2 and now Quartet course to improve your Japanese. じゃあこれは何のため? We're moving. また引っ越す? No, we're transitioning from Patreon to ToKiniAndy.com. なんで? Look.
なるほど。新しいやつの方が綺麗だね。
Exactly. It's easier to access, it looks better, it's easier to add new content to old lessons. I'm super excited for it.
私も出てるよ。これからよろしくお願いします。
Come join us on ToKiniAndy.com today and kickstart your Japanese learning experience. You'll have bonus grammar sentence videos, textbook practice videos, listening and shadowing videos, vocabulary videos, tests, and you'll be able to track your progress through fully structured lesson plans. Hope to see you there.
よろしくね。
Okay, enough of that. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and jump into in order to with tame ni and tame no. So the first thing to keep in mind is that there is another usage of tame ni, and that is going to be coming up in lesson 3. So this isn't all of the usages of tame ni that we're going to be going over tonight. The one we're going to be going over tonight is in order to do something, and that's going to be with verbs. So there is another one that's used with nouns and some other usages of it, but we're not going to be covering that tonight. We're just going to be covering the verb usage, which is verb in the dictionary form plus tame ni followed by another verb. Now the subject of both of these verb portions is going to be the same person. It has to be the same person or thing all the time. If a noun comes after tame, we use no instead of ni. So when you see the examples, it's going to make a lot more sense. But this means this thing or this noun in order to do this. So the English is sort of reversed. But you'll see what I mean with some example sentences. So, ラーメンを食べるために日本に行きました. So I went to Japan in order to eat ramen. That's the reason I went to Japan. So if we look at this sentence in the English, we have I went to Japan first, whereas in the Japanese it comes second. So that's what I mean by the order is reversed. In order to eat ramen, so it comes last in the English and first in the Japanese. So just think of that in the reverse order. I went to Japan in order to eat ramen. ラーメンを食べるために日本に行きました. So we notice here that taberu is in the dictionary form. So that is important. It needs to be in the dictionary form. One other thing to keep in mind is that these need to be verbs that are like actions that you do. Quartet puts it as verbs that express your will. So like you can't use verbs in the potential form or verbs that express like a state of being, not an action that you're doing. So it needs to be action verbs, basically like taberu, miru, iku, etc. So keep that in mind, and no potential verbs, just verbs in their dictionary form. Whatever comes after that, anything can come after that as long as the subject of what comes after it is the same. So the subject in this sense is me, the speaker. ラーメンを食べるため日本に行きました. I went to Japan. So that's that. Next sentence. アニメを見るためにネットフリックスを買いたい。ネットフリックスを買いたい。 So you can see here, whatever comes after it doesn't matter. Here we have the ikimashita is the polite past tense, and in the next sentence we have the want to conjugation of kao to buy. So I want to buy Netflix in order to watch anime. So anime wo miru tame ni, dictionary form, miru. Netflix wo kaitai, not kaimashita. Oh, that would also be a fine sentence. It would just mean something different. So I want to buy Netflix in order to watch anime. Let's go over a couple examples with nouns in the second sentence. When that happens, we don't use ni. After tame, we use no. So for example, we have これはラーメンを食べるためのスプーンです. This is a spoon for eating ramen, or this spoon is for the purpose of eating ramen. That would be more in the, well, it's sort of weird in this sentence because it takes on a slightly different English translation, although we could use the in order to as well. For example, a spoon in order to, or this spoon is in order to eat ramen is another way you could translate it, but that just sounds terrible in English, so we're not going to do that. We have the subject in this sentence, and that's kore, this, whereas in the other sentences for tame ni, we did not have watashi wa. But the subject there was implied as watashi wa. So we have これは, the subject is これ this. ラーメンを食べるためのスプーンです. This is a spoon for eating ramen. So ため can also be translated to for, ing something. So yeah, when the noun comes after it, it's sort of marking that object as an object for doing something else. And what it's the object for doing is whatever's in the first sentence. It might sound a little bit confusing, but I think this sentence makes that pretty obvious. I had a hard time saying Netflix last time, so let's see how I do this time. Netflix は映画やテレビ番組を見るためのサービスです. So in this case, we have a service that is for the purpose of watching movies and television shows. And that thing is Netflix. So the subject is Netflix. Netflix is a service for watching movies and TV shows. So in this kind of sentence with the noun, I feel like the subject is going to be stated a little bit more frequently. I think not in all of the example sentences within Quartet was the subject explicitly stated, but when it wasn't explicitly stated, it showed up in the conversation earlier. So it was obvious what the person was talking about in those examples. For example, in the main example sentences in Quartet, it's それ何のアプリ? What is that app? 音楽を聞くためのアプリだよ. So it's an app for listening to music. So you don't have to put このアプリは音楽を聞くためのアプリだよ. Because, well, Netflix は映画やテレビ番組を見るためのサービスです. Yeah, of course, is the and. It's not like to because it implies that there are other things it's for as well, not just movies and TV shows. Although that's pretty much all it's for, but anyway. So you could put to here if there was only two things that the service or whatever it was for, but I used the ya because it implies that there are more things. So let's go ahead and jump into the dialogue for tameni and tameno. You'll remember from last lesson, or you might not remember, but you might remember that last time Yuki, Andy, and Ando were going to a party, and Ando was ignoring Yuki, or at least she thought he was ignoring her. And she was going to ignore him because she was still angry at him for something. Anyway, we're at the party still. So that's what this whole dialogue section is going to be about. So, 仲良くするためにどうする? 仲良くするために何もしない。なんでだよ。だって、俺と仲良くなりたくないと思う。まあ、そうかな。これは仲良くするためのパーティーじゃないし。Let's read it at a normal speed. 仲良くするため、どうする? 仲良くするために、どうする? 仲良くするために何もしない。なんでだよ。だって、俺と仲良くなりたくないと思う。まあ、そうかな。これは仲良くするためのパーティーじゃないし。 All right, let's go over the English translation. I'll get to your questions and question time. So, 仲良く, let's quickly mention that 仲良く will be showing up in lesson 9. It's not covered yet, but it means to be nice to someone or to get along with someone. Or in this kind of situation where people aren't getting along, it means when you add suru to it, it means to make up with them, to make up with someone who you're fighting with. So, 仲良くするためにどうする? What are you going to do? どうする? In order to ために make up. 仲良くする. So, 仲良くするために so, Ando-san asks, 仲良くするために in order to make up? So here, usually we'd have something after it, but it's just a question that he doesn't understand what the reasoning, why does he need to make up with the person? So, in order to make up, what are you talking about? 仲良くするために? Yeah. 何もしない. I won't do anything. なんでだよ? So, なんでだよ specifically means what the heck, man. So, なんでだよ. You'll hear this one quite a bit, actually. だって because, a very casual because. 俺と仲良くなりたくないと思う. Because I don't think she wants to make up. The she is implied here, not mentioned. 俺と仲良くなりたくない doesn't want to make up with me or become friends with me or be friendly with me. と思う, I think. I don't think she wants to be. So it's 思う in the, not the negative, but the verb before it is in the negative. So it means I don't think she wants to. Blah, blah, blah. Or I think she doesn't want to do this. So either way. まあ、そうかな. Well, I wonder if that's true. これは仲良くするためのパーティーじゃないし. So here we have the ための with a noun after it. This isn't a party for the purpose of making up anyway, or for becoming friends with each other anyway. Most parties are, I think. So これは this is not a party for the purpose of パーティー、ためのパーティーじゃない. So it's not a party for the purpose of making up with Yuki in essentially. So これは仲良くするためのパーティーじゃないし. Question time. Why are you studying Japanese? So, 周りの人と話すために日本語を勉強しています. So that's my reason. I'm studying Japanese in order to speak with the people around me because I live in Japan. That's why I started studying Japanese, but everyone has a different reason. So what's your reason? So you're going to change what comes before ために. Remember, it needs to be a verb that is active and in the present tense. Present tense, short, the dictionary form. And what comes after ために, you can copy this exactly. 日本語を勉強しています. So, the reason I do this with がきっかけで, きっかけで. So, to use がきっかけで, by the way, the が is the が particle. So, the actual word is きっかけ, and で is also a particle. So, が and で are particles, and the word is きっかけ, which is like opportunity, or the reason, right? Something like that. Really, it's a noun, がきっかけで. But you can also use the short past tense of a verb, turn that into a noun with no or koto, nominalization, right? Turn whatever comes before it into a noun with no or koto, and then use がきっかけで. Now, what seems to be the most common usage of this when I've looked up a bunch of examples is short form of the short past of a verb plus no or koto, がきっかけで. But nouns also happen. So let's go ahead and look at a few examples to show you what this means. Essentially, it's the initial reason for something happening. We have a situation where, well, let's look at the example sentence and I'll explain it there. ソービームというブログを読んだのがきっかけでスペインに行きました。ソービームというブログを読んだのがきっかけでスペインに行きました。So I went to Spain after being motivated by reading the blog Soulbeam. So being motivated could be one translation of this, or the initial reason I went to Spain was because I read the blog Soulbeam. So it was the motivating factor or the thing that changed me from not going to Spain to going to Spain. So it's the reason for it. And that's pretty much the gist of it. It's the reason for it. And it's a little bit polite, but it showed up in like a couple thousand YouTube videos when I searched it up. So, excuse me. So it's common enough. ソービームというブログを読んだのがきっかけでスペインに行きました. So the reason I went to Spain, this is a true story by the way, I went to Spain after being motivated by reading the blog Soulbeam. I don't know if the blog still exists, but she's an inspiring writer who walked across Spain, and that inspired me to walk across Spain, though by a much lesser walked path than she did. So looking at this, Spain ni ikimashita, that's the thing I did that I hadn't done before whatever this thing is happened. So that thing that inspired me to do this, or that was the initial reason for me doing this, going to Spain, comes in the first part of the sentence. Solbeam toyu blogu o yonda. I did that, and that inspired me to go to Spain. So, 新しい仕事を見つけたことがきっかけで会社を辞めた. The cue for, it's another way you could translate it. The cue for quitting my company was that I found a new job. Or I quit my company for the initial, the reason I quit my job was that I found a new job. Would be another way you could translate this. But I like the cue for quitting my company was that I found a new job. That's one way you could absolutely translate this. Let's go over some nouns coming before it. Barbecue がきっかけでユキと友達になった. Another true story. The initial reason we became friends was a barbecue, or the motivation behind, or the initial factor for us becoming friends was a barbecue. That's what caused us to become friends. That's where we met, for example. When you're talking about meeting people, or when you first had a special idea, and you're giving the reason for it, this is a very common construction to use. So, バーベキューがきっかけでユキと友達になった. 元気のレッスン3の質問をよく聞かれた. Period. そのことがきっかけで元気を教え始めた. So, I found a lot of examples of きっかけで with そのこと when people are speaking. そのことがきっかけで元気を教え始めた. So, what's going on here is that usually you'd have a verb here, and that would be 聞かれた. 聞かれたことがきっかけで元気を教え始めた. So, you can get rid of the period and the その and just say 元気のレッスン3の質問をよく聞かれたことがきっかけで元気を教え始めた. But a lot of times in conversation or in YouTube videos or when people are talking, they instead are saying something that happened, and then they say それがきっかけで or そのことがきっかけで. I hear it a lot, so keep that in mind. You're not necessarily going to hear a regular noun or the past tense before がきっかけで. You might hear そのこと or それが fairly often, and it's pointing to the sentence that came before it. そのことがきっかけで元気を教え始めた. I was often asked questions about Genki Lesson 3. That's the initial reason that I started to teach from Genki. I only planned to teach up to Lesson 3, but I ran a poll after I taught Lesson 3, and it turned out that 90% of the people on my channel were there for Genki, so I figured I should just keep going. It's a good thing I did. Let's jump into the dialogue. I'll read it slowly one time, then at full speed. I'll go over the English translation, then we'll get to question time and your questions. 仲良くするためのものじゃないんだって。何が？パーティーが。何がきっかけで私が飲み会に誘われてないから怒っているって思ったんだろう。誰かがそう言ったかな？そうかな。そういえばそんなに飲み会一緒にしているの？まあ週に1、2回くらいかな。もっと誘ってよ。Full speed. 仲良くするためのものじゃないんだって。何が？パーティーが。何がきっかけで私が飲み会に誘われてないから怒っているって思ったんだろう。誰かがそう言ったかな？そうかな。そういえば、そんなに飲み会一緒にしているの？まあ、週に1、2回くらいかな。もっと誘ってよ。Let's go with the English translation. Okay, there's a couple long ones in there. 仲良くするためのものじゃないんだって。You could also say もん。You don't, in conversation, this might not be mono. It might be もん。Mono is often shortened to もん。So, 仲良くするためのものじゃない。仲良くするためのもんじゃないんだって。This isn't a thing for making up, apparently. 何が？ What isn't? パーティーが。The party. 何がきっかけで私が飲み会に誘われて いないから怒っているって思ったんだろう. Okay, this is a complicated sentence. Let's read the English translation once, then I'll break it down. I wonder what his motivation for thinking that I'm angry because I'm not being invited to drinking parties is. I wonder what his motivation for thinking that I'm angry because I'm not being invited to drinking parties is, or I wonder what is his motivation. Okay, there's an is missing from the English translation. Sorry about that. So, you can put nani before がきっかけで. Technically, nani is a noun. I think it's treated as a noun. So you can put it before がきっかけで to ask a question. What was the initial reason, or what was the motivating factor behind you doing something? So she's asking, I wonder what, there's the だろう. I wonder what is the motivating factor, or the reason behind him thinking, so 思った him thinking, 私が飲み会に誘われてない I'm not being invited to drinking parties. So から怒っている I'm angry って思ったんだろう Why did he think that? って思ったんだろう何がきっかけで something 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 って思ったんだろう What is the reason for him thinking that? And this is the thing he thinks 私が飲み会に誘われてないから怒っている Okay? You got that? We can look at it a little bit more later if you want to have a look at it a little bit more, or if you're a little bit confused by it still. But here's the thing that he thinks, and 何がきっかけでそう思ったんだろう. That's what, that's what sort of sandwiches it in. 誰かがそう言ったかな? I wonder if someone said that. そうかな? I wonder. そういえば, speaking of which, remember, いえば came up last week, or 2 weeks ago. そんなに飲み会一緒にしているの? Speaking of which, are you guys having that many drinking parties together? Or are you drinking that much together? まあ, well, 週に1、2回ぐらいかな. About 1 or 2 times per week. I said good eye. I always say good eye in conversation. I almost never use could I, so it's a little bit harder for me to say it. Just so you know. もっと誘ってよ. Huh? Invite me more, man. By the way, the te form followed by yo can be somewhat of a light command. 誘ってよ, or sort of joking almost. もっと誘ってよ. Just so you know. Question time. 何がきっかけでこのチャンネルに来ましたか? What was the initial reason or the motivation for you coming to this channel? What was the initial reason you came to this channel? An example explanation or an example answer would be Q time, : 元気を探したのがきっかけでこのチャンネルに来ました. The initial reason I found this channel is because I searched for Genki. So please tell me the initial reason or the motivation behind you coming to this channel. This channel being ToKini Andy. Our next section is going to be come to do with ようになる. This is a fun one. It's one that I wanted to use a lot while we were studying through Genki and people had questions and tried to make sentences. And I was like, oh, this would be perfect for that. But we didn't know how to use it yet. So this is one of many ways that you can use ように. This is with なる. We're also going to be covering ように with する a little bit later. So stick around for that if you're interested. So come to do ようになる. Come to do, by that I mean something I didn't do before or was not able to do before, and now I do that thing habitually, or I can do the thing that I couldn't do before. So here's how it works. We've got the verb in the dictionary form plus ようになる. This situation means that you started to do something habitually that you did not do before. So that's verb dictionary form plus ようになる. The verb in the short potential form, so can do, means that you became able to do something that you could not do before. A verb in the short negative plus ようになる means that, I believe, yeah, we're going to cover that one a little bit later, but with the short negative with ようになる means that you gradually stopped doing something that you did before. So you gradually stopped doing something that you did before. So verb in the negative plus ようになる. So ないようになる. Gradually stopped doing something that you did before. That's what that one means. But you also cannot use verbs that imply change, like 太る to get fat, or 痩せる to lose weight, or to 増える to increase. Depending on the ending of the verb, the meaning changes, and we're going to go over some examples of all of those now. So, the first one's a nice long one. 友達が筋トレの仕方を教えてくれたが、のがcaught a mistake. のがきっかけで ジムに行くようになった。Okay, we got a mistake there in the sentence. Caught it quickly though. This should be こと or no. Sorry about that. 友達が筋トレの仕方を教えてくれたのがきっかけでジムに行くようになった。So we are going to use きっかけand ようになった together. So the initial reason that I started going to the gym regularly or habitually, that's what ようになった implies, is that my friend was kind enough to teach me, 教えてくれた how to lift weights. Okay, so now that should be correct. Okay. 友達が筋トレの仕方を教えてくれたのがきっかけでジムに行くようになった。Okay, we fixed that. So, the ようになった here, 行くようになった is became like started doing something regularly. So, started going to the gym regularly. ジムに行くようになった. So, that's the main sentence here. That is using ようになった is ジムに行くようになった。I started going to the gym regularly. And what ようになった implies here, it implies that I didn't go to the gym before at all, but now I do it habitually. That's what this implies. Now, the rest of it is just using がきっかけで it makes it, it's giving you the reason that I now do that habitually. 友達が筋トレの仕方を教えてくれた. So my friend taught me the way, 仕方, to lift weights のがきっかけで that's the initial reason ジムに行くようになった。 Next sentence 新しいパソコンを買ったから毎日ゲームをするようになりました。 I bought a new computer so I started playing games every day. So ゲームをするようになりました。 So I became do games is the literal translation of this, but I do it habitually now. The 毎日 also helps solidify the fact that it's habitual. But 毎日ゲームをするようになりました. It means the ようになりました of course implies that I didn't play games before. And now I play them habitually because the verb is in the present tense, right? The present dictionary form. 行く is also in the present dictionary form. We use から to make it a little more complicated and give you the reason. 新しいパソコンを買ったから. I bought a new computer, so 毎日ゲームをするようになりました. So I started playing games every day. Our next examples are going to be using the potential. So you'll see that how this changes the meaning a little bit from if you use a verb in the dictionary form. So 友達が教えてくれたから so it's very similar. 筋トレができるようになった. My friend was kind enough to teach me. 友達が教えてくれたから so I became able to lift weights. 筋トレができるようになった. So this implies that I couldn't do it before. It doesn't mean that I didn't do it before. Maybe I tried, but I couldn't. But 筋トレができるようになった means I became able to now. We had this verb a couple weeks ago in our part 1, 思いつく, 思いついた. It's an N2 verb that means to come into my head or to come to mind or, to come to mind. So I wanted to use it again. 思いついた歌を弾けるようになりたい. I want to become able to play songs that come into my head. So you can put the なる in ようになる in any tense you want, pretty much. You can even say, I want to become able to do this. So I cannot do this thing now. I cannot play songs that come into my head. I can't. I wish I could. So 思いついた歌を弾けるようになりたい. I want to become able to play songs that come into my mind. We're going to cover the negative version in the dialogue. So let's go ahead and jump into the dialogue. I'll read it slowly once, then at full speed, and then I'll get to your questions and question time. ごめん。ユキは安藤さんのことあまり好きじゃないと思ってなかなか誘えないようになった。なるほど。アンディを誘わないようになろうかな。なんだよ、急に。安藤さんと遊べばもっと飲めるようになるかもしれないし。プン。一体何が起こったんだろう、今。Full speed. ごめん、ユキは安藤さんのことあんまり好きじゃないと思ってなかなか誘えないようになった。なるほど。アンディを誘わないようになろうかな。なんだよ、急に。安藤さんと遊べばもっと飲めるようになるかもしれないし。ぷん。一体何が起こったんだろう、今。Let's go to the English translation. So, ごめん、ユキは安藤さんのことあんまり好きじゃないと思って。So, before I get to the next part, sorry, I thought you didn't like Ando-san much. I thought you didn't like Ando-san much. Yuki は Ando-san のことあんまり好きじゃないと思って。I thought you didn't like Ando-san much. So, なかなか誘えないようになった。So, なかなか plus a negative verb means cannot easily do or cannot easily do something. So, in this situation, I translated to a little difficult. And then 誘 is to invite, so なかなか誘えない. Cannot easily invite is what that translates to. But then ようになった means that I gradually became unable to invite you. Gradually, ne? Because the negative plus ようになる implies a gradual change. Now, the reason I want to mention that is that in Quartet, it actually mentions, like in the actual little note for how to make it only actually mentions the dictionary form of verbs plus yo ni naru, or the potential forms. And then there's a little thing after that. It has na yo ni naru and naku naru. And it looks like when you read that you can use naku naru. So minaku natta, I stopped watching, versus minai yo ni natta. There's a question mark. So it implies, if you look at this, that you can't use nai yo ni naru, is what the quartet entry looks like. But that's not the case. I don't know why it's like that. The sentence that they give you doesn't make sense. Doesn't quite work. Because I actually mentioned this in a little bit more detail in the bonus video that's coming out tomorrow. But 全然テレビを見ないようになった is the sentence that they have as the example. And the reason that one doesn't make much sense is because 大学に入ってから全然テレビを見ないようになった doesn't make sense because it implies a sudden change when they went to college with the 全然, which means completely did not do or never do, completely never do watch TV, whereas ないようになる implies a gradual change. So the reason that sentence is weird is not because ないようになる is weird. It's because what they're talking about is a sudden change, and ないようになる implies a gradual change. But there's nothing in the lesson that explains that. Fortunately, the grammar dictionaries do. So that was good. If you want to explain a sudden change that happened, that you stopped doing something, you use なくなる. So 食べなくなった. Stopped eating something, basically, stopped eating something that you used to eat. オニオンも食べなくなった. I stopped eating onions. Whereas if you gradually over time stopped eating onions, オニオンを食べないようになった would be perfectly fine. So don't let that part in Quartet confuse you. It is okay to use the negative with よになる, but it implies a gradual change as opposed to a sudden change, which the present tense and the potential do imply. So it's a little bit confusing there. Okay. なるほど. I see. アンディを誘わないようになろうかな. I guess I'll go ahead and become able to invite you. So we got the negative here again. And it's sort of just a play on words. Yuki's saying, I guess I just will become able to not invite you over time as well. The naro is the volitional. So I'll go ahead and become able to invite you. Being a little angry because Ando and Andy didn't invite her to drinking parties. Turns out that was something she wasn't happy about. なんだよ, 急に. What the heck all of a sudden? 急に, all of a sudden. なんだよ. What the heck? なんだよ, 急に. 安藤さんと遊べば, if I hang out with 安藤さん, もっと飲めるようになるかもしれないし. I might become able to drink more too. So here we've got the present tense, so will become かもしれない, maybe or probably. So もっと飲めるようになるかもしれないし. Pum. Pum is an angry sound effect for when people turn away like this. That's what that is. 一体 what on earth 何が起こったんだろう今一体何が起こったんだろう今 What on earth just happened right now? Question time. What is something you can't do now that you want to become able to do? So, ピアノを弾けるようになりたい. I want to become able to play the piano. So you're going to have to use the potential form of a verb and ようになりたい. This if you want to. So what is something you cannot do now that you want to become able to do? Throw question time up there. Let's go ahead and move on to make a point of and make sure to with ようにする. So ようにする versus the ている form ようにしている have slightly different meanings. So I'm going to teach them slightly separately. So ようにする means that you're going to make a point of doing something in the future. To say that, you take the dictionary form of a verb plus ようにする. You can also take the negative, the short negative of a verb, and add ようにする to say that you're going to make a point of not doing something in the future. Now, if you use ようにしている, it means you're making an effort to do something now, presently, currently, I'm doing this thing or making a point of doing this thing. It doesn't necessarily mean you're succeeding, but you're making a point of trying to do this thing. So for that, you use, once again, the dictionary form of a verb or the short negative and ようにしている. And that means I am currently making an effort to do something. First example, nice short one. それを言わないようにする. I'll make it a point to not say that. 明日早く着くようにします. I'll make sure that I arrive early tomorrow. 明日早く着くようにします. So, for example, maybe you were late today and your boss is angry. So you say, すいません、明日早く着くようにします. Something like that, right? I'll make sure that I arrive early tomorrow, I promise. Or your mom's angry because you keep saying a bad word. それを言わないようにします. Or それを言わないようにする. For example, right? Now with している, you may remember from Genki 2, ことにしている. And this is similar, but ことにしている means that you are doing that thing right now. Whereas ようにしてる means that you're making an effort to do that thing right now. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're succeeding every day or that you are doing it every day. It doesn't imply that like ことにしている does. ことにしている means you're doing it every day. This means I'm making an effort to do it regularly or whatever. So there's where the difference is with those two. First sentence, 最近毎日8時間寝るようにしている. Recently, I've been making an effort to sleep for 8 hours every night. It doesn't necessarily mean that I am sleeping for 8 hours every night. I'm making an effort to, and I am right now, recently. 最近毎日8時間寝ることにしています means that I've decided to and I am sleeping for 8 hours every night. So there's where the difference is. 野菜をもっと食べるようにしていないよ. This is sort of a weird sentence. So I haven't been making an effort to eat more vegetables, actually. So it's a very specific example for a very specific situation, but I just wanted to point out that you can conjugate the teiru into the negative if you want, though it's probably not extremely common. So what might have happened here is someone said, "Oh, you've been eating a lot of vegetables lately, or you've been making a point to eat a lot of vegetables lately, eh?" いや、野菜をもっと食べるようにしていないよ. I haven't been making an effort to eat more vegetables, actually. Kind of a weird specific example, but you can do it. So those are the two main ways you're going to be using ようにする. Make a point to in the future, or make a point to not do in the future, or I am making a point of doing something, or I am not making a point, or I'm making a point of not doing something. So one other thing, if we just jump back up here, I don't have an example like that. I might have one in the bonus video, I can't remember. But 野菜を食べないようにしている, if we had changed it to that instead, it would mean that I'm making a point to not eat vegetables. So 野菜を食べない ようにしている. That's what that means. I'm making a point to not eat vegetables, whereas this is, I haven't been making a point of eating more vegetables. So slightly different, right? All right, let's jump into the dialogue slowly once, then at full speed, then we'll get to question time. おい、安藤さん。はーい、どうした？一緒に飲む？いいんじゃない？これからもっと飲むようにしたい。もっと飲むようにするんだ。素敵だね。ちなみにアンディから安藤さんは私が安藤さんを無視しているって思っているって聞いたけど、そうじゃないよ。アンディがそれ言っちゃったの？ひどい。Full speed。おい、安藤さん。はーい、どうした？一緒に飲む？いいんじゃない？これからもっと飲むようにしたい。もっと飲むようにするんだ。素敵だね。ちなみにアンディから安藤さんは私が安藤さんを無視しているって思っているって聞いたけど、そうじゃないよ。アンディさんがそれ言っちゃったの？ひどい。There's a really long one there that is confusing. We'll get to it. おい、安藤さん。Hey, 安藤さん。はーい。どうした？ Hey, what's up? 一緒に飲む？ Shall we drink together? Or let's drink together? いいんじゃない？ Sure. Why not? これから from now on もっと飲むようにしたい. I want to make it a point to drink more. Not many people probably come in with that goal, but apparently Yuki has that goal today. もっと飲むようにしたい. From now on I want to make it a point to drink more. もっと飲むようにするんだ. 素敵だね. You're gonna make it a point to drink more. That's wonderful, isn't it? I guess. Okay, so here's our nice long sentence that has nothing to do with the grammar point, but we're going to break it down anyway. ちなみに, by the way, アンディから from Andy, 安藤さんは私が安藤さんを無視しているって思っているって聞いたけど. So, I heard from Andy. アンディから聞いたけど. So there's our first part. アンディから聞いたけど. What did I hear? 安藤さんは思っている. So there's our next part, the next sandwich. 安藤さんは思っている. So what is he thinking? 安藤さん thinks that 私が安藤さんを無視している. That's what he thinks. So there's the inner circle right here. 私が安藤さんを無視している. I am ignoring you, 安藤さん. 安藤さん thinks that 安藤さんは思っている. And I heard that, you think that, 聞いたけど, from Andy san. Andy san から聞いたけど. So two sandwiches with the main point on the inside. 私が安藤さんを無視している. Being the main point. そうじゃないよ. That's not the case though, you know? アンディがそれ言っちゃったの? Andy went and said that? ひどい. That's terrible. Question time. What is something you're making an effort to do regularly? Are, right now. 毎日勉強するようにしています. I'm making an effort to study every day. That's not true. I haven't been studying enough recently. But anyway, my head is literally expanding from these allergies and I'm not feeling wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and slip right into according to with noun plus によると. According to, we've covered this before actually, when we were talking about quotations way back in Genki 1, I believe. And this was sort of a footnote or just an offhanded point within to I can't remember exactly what point it was included in actually in Genki 1. But it was mentioned, but we're going to go over it slightly more tonight, and that is noun plus によると. One thing to mention though is that you need generally at the end of the sentence with によると soda or dashi. We covered dashi last week and a little bit of soda in the question and answer section. Soda and dashi are very similar. Soda generally is used for saying exactly what someone said, exactly what they said. And dashi may have a little bit more of the speaker's opinion on the matter, but yeah, something that they heard somewhere. So によると means according to something apparently. right? With soda and dashi. So you need to have those. So I think ni yoru to was included in the section on soda and genki too, maybe. So that might be where we covered it a little bit there. We've already covered it a little bit, and it's very straightforward, so I only have 2 examples for this tonight. And they are tenki yoho ni yoru to ashita wa oame da sou desu. According to the weather forecast, tenki yoho ni yoru to, it appears that tomorrow will be heavy rain. So, ni yoru to feels kind of official. Yeah. But it can be used in regular conversation as well. But a lot of times where you're going to see it is when they're referring to something official sounding, like the weather report, or according to a report, or according to the news, or according to, something official sounding. But it's not always the case. There are situations like this as well where it's used. Ando-san no hanashi ni yoru to, yuki ni kirawarete dashi. So notice we have so desu and in the first one and dashi here. According to Ando-san's story, Ando-san no hanashi ni yoru to, he is hated by Yuki, apparently. So that's what he said. And apparently that's a fact, but it's according to him. So we need the apparently, because we don't know for a fact. It's just according to this or according to this report, this is going to happen. And softening things like that in Japanese is very, very common and important. Adding that apparently to not imply any finality or confidence in an answer is very important. So those are the 2 examples, and I use it a few times in this dialogue, or maybe just one time. But we're going to do the dialogue. I'll read it slowly one time, then at full speed we'll go into question time, and hopefully my head will still be on and it's not ballooning completely off of me by the time we get done here. All right. なんで俺が言ったこと全部ユキに言うの？だってみんな仲良くしてほしいから。なんかひどいね。ごめん。まあ、ユキによるとこれからもっと飲むようにしたいそうだ。だからユキと飲むかな？アンディじゃなくて。ピエーン Alright, full speed. なんで俺が言ったこと全部ユキに言うの？だってみんな仲良くしてほしいから。なんかひどいね。ごめん。まあ、ユキによるとこれからもっと飲むようにしたいそうだ。だからユキと飲むかな？アンディじゃなくて。ピエン Let's go with the English. なんで Why? 俺が言ったことThe things I said, everything I said, 全部。俺が言ったこと全部 everything I said, ユキに言うの Why would you tell Yuki everything I said is the full thing. だって Because みんな仲良くしてほしいから I want everyone to get along. なんかひどいね。なんか that's like it. なんか is like the American English like. Like, I don't know. Like this, like that. Nanka. Try using it. It's just like the American like. It's a little less cringy. I don't know. Is it cringy? Is like cringy in American English? We just use it all the time. But nanka is pretty common to use. Nanka hidoi ne. Gomen. Sorry. Okay, long sentence. Ma. Yuki ni yoru to. So, according to Yuki. Like I said, it's often used with official sounding things, but it doesn't have to be. It can be just used with people's names, or people's stories or things like that. It's not always something official. And in this case, it's just Yuki. Yuki ni yoru to, これからもっと飲むようにしたいそうだ。飲むようにしたいそうだ。Apparently, Yuki wants to make it a point to drink more from now on. It's just literally, you just read it backwards for the English. Apparently, Yuki wants to make it a point to drink more from now on, just backwards. だから, so, Yuki to nomu kana? I guess I'll drink with Yuki. Andy じゃなくて, not Andy. Bien. Bien is just a sound that means like boo-hoo. But literally boo-hoo, not like the sarcastic boo-hoo. Bien! It's a sound effect in Japanese. So enjoy that. All right, that brings us to question time. Tell me some news you heard recently and where you heard it from. For me, 雪によると日本の消費税は 15% まで上がるそうです。According to Yuki, it appears that Japan's consumption tax will rise to 15%. Eventually 20 is their goal, but that won't be for a while, hopefully. It just went up from 8 to 10 like 2 years ago. Which brings us to thumbs up を攻撃してください。チャンネル登録お願いします。So please smash the thumbs up button if you haven't yet already. I think most of you have. And if you're not subscribed, which I would be very surprised at if you're at this point in the video, please チャンネル登録お願いします. Please subscribe and hit the bell so you know when we go live next week with the practice stream for lesson 1, part 2. All right, guys. Good night. See you later. I've got to run this. Bye-bye.
日本語を喋れるようになりたいのか。
Hold up. We already did this. We already talked about how you can use our Genki 1 and 2 and now Quartet course to improve your Japanese.
じゃあこれは何のため？
We're moving.
また引っ越す？
No, we're transitioning from Patreon to ToKiniAndy.com.
なんで？
Look.
なるほど。新しいやつの方が綺麗だね。
Exactly. It's easier to access, it looks better, it's easier to add new content to old lessons. I'm super excited for it.
私も出てるよ。これからよろしくお願いします。
Come join us on ToKiniAndy.com today and kickstart your Japanese learning experience. You'll have bonus grammar sentence videos, textbook practice videos, listening and shadowing videos, vocabulary videos, tests, and you'll be able to track your progress through fully structured lesson plans. Hope to see you there.
よろしくね。